I'm the Reverend Bill Zelazny, and I welcome you to our Channing Memorial Church 2021 Summer Service Program. The World Bank issued a white paper recently that said climate change is deeply intertwined with global patterns of inequality. A UNESCO report said that without equality and equity, in other words, without peace and security, we cannot effectively fight climate change. This is because the most vulnerable people bear the brunt of climate change, yet contribute the least to this problem. As the impact of climate change mounts, millions of vulnerable people face greater challenges in terms of extreme events, health effects, food security, livelihood security, water security, and cultural identity. And unfortunately, the most vulnerable are often disproportionately impacted by the cost of addressing climate change. In the absence of well-designed and inclusive policies, climate change mitigation measures can place a higher financial burden on poor households. Poor and marginalized groups are raising their voices to call for more ambitious action on climate change, but their voices are often overpowered by other interests. Climate change is more than just an environmental crisis. It is a social crisis that compels us to address issues of inequality on many levels, between the wealthy and poor, between different countries, between rich and poor within a country, between men and women, and between generations. Our presenter today believes it is urgent to consider who is most at risk and how our response could either favor certain populations or economic groups or add financial and livelihood costs to others. Therefore, she contends, we need to engage as broadly as possible in discussions about our efforts of ocean conservation to ensure fairness and equity is a central consideration in all that is undertaken. We light this chalice today for the web of life which sustains us, for the earth, for the oceans, for the sky. We light this chalice for justice, for equality considerations and treatment regardless of economic circumstances, race, and ethnicity. We light this chalice for the sacred circle of life in which we have our being. Today, congregation member Lisa Colburn is bringing us the message. Lisa has been with the congregation, been involved with the congregation in many ways, including serving on the Board of Trustees and on the Committee of Ministry. She is a fisheries anthropologist working here in Rhode Island, who is bringing her expertise to the issue of climate justice in relation to coastal communities for us to consider, for us to think about the actions that need to be taken and our role in it. I present to you Lisa Colburn.
The push for social equity and our response to climate change intersect in the ocean space. As sea level rises and storms intensify, it is urgent to consider who is most at risk and how our response might favor the most advantaged people in coastal communities. We should engage as broadly as possible in efforts of ocean conservation, and fairness must be a central consideration as we seek solutions. Although the health of the ocean is a growing concern for many, it is not a new one. Rachel Carson foretold in her 1951 book, The Sea Around Us, the following: Although man's record as a steward of the natural resources of the earth has been a discouraging one, there has long been a certain comfort in the belief that the sea at least was inviolate, beyond man's ability to change and to despoil. But this belief, unfortunately, has proved to be naive. The climate system is changing as a result of increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The ocean plays a huge role in the climate system. A warmer atmosphere is melting glaciers into the ocean and changing ocean temperature. In turn, ocean currents and temperatures affect the climate. Warm waters shift ocean currents, which can change the climate in whole continents. Warmer oceans make stronger hurricanes. According to Dr. Ayanna Johnson, sea level rise is a challenge that is so big that many people find it hard to deal with. Unfortunately, it's not going to go away, and we need to be creative and face it head on, because sea level rise is not going to rise inches. It's going to rise feet and potentially meters by the end of this century. On top of that, we're going to experience more intense storm surges and high tides. This is going to affect every coastal community, including Aquidneck Island, and change what is possible and where along the coastline. But how does the mounting crisis in the ocean have anything to do with familiar issues of social justice? Isn't climate change and saving the ocean an issue for privileged populations? Climate change, a result of society's choices, can upset anybody's daily life in countless ways. But not all climate impacts are created equal or distributed equally. From extreme weather to rising sea levels, the effects of climate change often have disproportionate effects on historically marginalized or underserved communities. A new study by the University of Rhode Island revealed the fact that in Rhode Island, people of color have been exposed to significantly higher levels of air pollution than white people for decades. In a recent issue of Yale Climate Connections, the author identified how climate impacts can exacerbate inequitable social conditions. For example, people with disabilities and people with chronic illnesses may have a harder time living through periods of severe heat or being able to quickly and safely evacuate from storms or fire. People with limited income may live in subsidized housing, which too often is located in a floodplain. Their housing options may also have inadequate insulation, mold problems, or air conditioning to effectively combat severe heat or cope with strong storms. Economically challenged people may also be hard-pressed to afford flood or fire insurance, rebuild homes, or pay for steep medical bills after catastrophic events. Language barriers can also make it difficult for immigrant communities to get early information about incoming storms or weather disasters or wildfires, or to communicate effectively with first responders in the midst of an evacuation order. For example, some indigenous communities are already seeing their homes and livelihoods lost to rising sea levels or drought. The Biloxi Choctaw tribe in Louisiana has lost nearly all of its land and is relocating to higher ground. A combination of sinking land and sea level rise has submerged more than 95% of the island, and fewer than 40 families remain. Poor communities, and many communities of color are poor because of the history of racism in development, are the ones who have the fewest resources to move. They're the ones who are most often in harm's way. This is certainly a justice issue with how we deal with sea level rise. Many of those most vulnerable to the impact of climate change also have disproportionately low responsibility for causing the emissions responsible for climate change in the first place. Particularly youth or people of any age living in developing countries that produce fewer emissions per capita than is the case in major polluting countries. It is a myth that historically excluded people don't care about climate change. According to a poll by Yale and George Mason universities, 57% of Black people and 70% of Latinx people interviewed were concerned about climate change compared to 49% of white people. There is a reason that Latinx people are more concerned about climate change, having more egalitarian worldviews and a stronger sense that your community, your friends, your family expect you to do something. Climate justice is a term, and more than that, a movement that acknowledges climate change can have different social, economic, public health, and other adverse impacts on excluded populations. Advocates for climate justice are striving to have these inequities addressed head-on through long-term mitigation and adaptation strategies. Ocean justice, as Dr. Johnson describes it, is where ocean conservation and issues of social equity meet. What does that mean? She says that solving the climate crisis is not just an engineering problem, it's a social problem as well. We have to shift what we expect and how we see the world. As an example, there is some not in my backyard thinking when it comes to renewable offshore energy. There are wealthy communities on Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, and in the Hamptons that don't want wind turbines offshore, even though they're now so far offshore that you can't really see them. The stance of these communities is, we don't want that here, even though these are the same communities that often support environmentalism more broadly. With an awareness of the risks faced by people across the world, right here on Aquidneck Island, we can begin to shift how we see our community and what to expect from change. This is not just about saving high-value beachfront properties or preserving historical neighborhoods from storm surge. It's about social equity through the climate literacy of Rhode Island children and, on a local level, through equitable access to the ocean on Aquidneck Island. Consider supporting the Rhode Island Climate Literacy Act. This act would help ensure that all Rhode Island students attending public schools become climate literate by the time they graduate from 12th grade. Why is this important? Climate education helps our young people develop the skills and knowledge to embrace our growing green economy, take individual and collective action towards addressing environmental challenges, and be civically engaged with climate and environmental policies. Ocean access on Aquidneck Island is a hot issue right now with the new Riptobus route from the north end of Newport to First and Second Beach, sponsored by Emmanuel Church. I've heard recently that there are some people in other communities that are concerned about the lack of revenue by people arriving by bus rather than cars. In the end, there is no single way to define, let alone champion, climate justice. But in combination with other current social justice movements, perhaps epitomized but not limited to the Black Lives Matter movement, many experts see climate justice becoming an increasingly significant component of overall concerns raised by climate change. I will close with a quote by Sylvia Earle, a marine biologist. Even if you never have the chance to see or touch the ocean, it touches you with every breath you take, every drop of water you drink, every bite you consume. Everyone, everywhere is inextricably connected to and utterly dependent upon the existence of the sea.
It is through financial gifts from our annual pledges and our Sunday offerings that we are able to provide these summer services, to provide services all year long in other programs, and to have staff to work for the congregation. I hope you will take a moment now or after you finish watching this service to go to our website, www.channingchurch.org. Click on the Give tile that's on the home page, and then follow the directions to make a donation. You can make a one-time donation or set it up to make multiple donations. Each donation is very important for the operations of this church. If you found this service or our other summer services interesting and meaningful, please come back and bring a friend or let a friend know about them and about Channing Church. And direct your friends and your neighbors to our website, www.channingchurch.org, to find out more about this congregation and about Unitarian Universalism. Our closing words are by Joseph Cleveland. May we hear the melody of life and find ourselves singing harmony. May we feel in our bones the rhythm of life and find ourselves dancing. So be it.